Hello, my friends. Hello, and welcome once again to Stately Vaughan Manor, where Roger and I are very late today. We're very late making this video, Roger. We're so late. This is going to be my thumbnail for today. How'd that thumbnail turn out? I don't know, but there you go. So today I'm going to be talking about my vintage science fiction TBR box. So I had a TBR box. Basically, it's a box that I go into if I don't have anything pre-planned to read at that moment, and I just pick a book out of it and read it. That way it makes it simple. I pre-plan. I don't have to go through all of my books and say, do I want to read this? What should I read next? I pretty much always know what I'm going to read next. I have things ready. But because going into this year, I decided, you know what? I really want to focus on all of the vintage science fiction that I haven't read. So I changed up my TBR box to just be vintage science fiction. I will still read other stuff because I've got all these events. I've got June on the Range, which is all Westerns, which is fantastic. I've got Garbaugust, which is just a bunch of trash. There's Sumerian September, which I will not forget mentioning today, which is Robert E. Howard, which is all great stuff. And I've got some other things to read throughout the year. But I do want to focus on vintage science fiction just because I've got so much of it. So I did change up my TBR box. Most of my books, by the way, are in boxes like this, these weatherproof boxes, because I don't have enough space to shelve all the books that I own. There's just not enough room. So most of my books are in stacks and stacks and stacks of boxes that look a lot like this. And that's how I keep most of them. Yeah, there's a lot. And it'll make it easy to, move them out, once I croak, which hopefully will be not for hundreds of years, right, Roger? Aren't you going to share your secret of immortality with me? He keeps promising and it keeps not happening. Oh, well, let's move on to the TBR box, shall we? So one thing that's not in the box that I definitely want to mention, and I haven't mentioned in a while, that I want to read this book, which is The Dying Earth, Tales of the Dying Earth by Jack Vance. Yes, I am aware that I need to read this book. I know I have to read it. I will read it. This is actually 4 books in one, which is kind of awesome. So yeah, Dying Earth, I do need to get to that, and I will get to it. So this is vintage science fiction. There's also some vintage fantasy mixed up in this box, but let's open it up. So I just pretty much just picked out these books sort of at random to be the next science fiction books that I read, science fiction and fantasy. Let me move these around so that I have room to go through them. Okay. What's in this box anyway? So one book I do need to get to, and I haven't read it, and I'm ashamed I haven't read it. I'm filled with shame. I'm not. I just haven't read this book yet, and I should. And that's Ringworld by Larry Niven. One of those science fiction books that you always hear about, and I haven't read yet, and I should read it. It's Ringworld. It's by Larry Niven. Everybody's read this book but me. I'll read it. It's in my box. It's in my TBR box. I will get to it. I will get to Ringworld. I don't have any of the Ringworld sequels. I know there are sequels to Ringworld that Grammaticus talked all about in his videos, but I haven't. I don't have those. But I do have this one, so I'll read that. So there's that. Also, the original iRobot, Adam Link robot. So these are the Adam Link stories. There's Adam Link with his dog. Gotta have a dog. Dogs are awesome. So Adam Link, robot. Isaac Asimov says, to anyone fond of the robot story in science fiction, Adam Link is of extraordinary interest. The robot with emotion has rarely been so well handled. This is by Eando Binder or Eando Binder. I'm not sure which one. And isn't this a pen name for 2 different writers, or is that someone else? Someone will tell me. Someone tell me. But I certainly never read this. I have read some of the EC Comics adaptations of some of the stories in this volume, and those were awesome. But I haven't read the original book, so now I'm going to eventually, because it's in my TBR box. It's one of the vintage science fiction books I'm going to read next, Adam Link Robot. So that's in there. This is actually fantasy. This is L. Sprague de Camp's The Spell of Seven, which just looks awesome. It's sword and sorcery stories, and I love sword and sorcery. Now, L. Sprague de Camp made sure to put in this very slim anthology 2 of his own stories. But the other stories in here look pretty good. We've got Bazaar of the Bazaar from Fritz Leiber, The Dark Eidolon by Clark Ashton Smith, The Horde of the Ghibellines by Lord Dunsany, King in Darkness from Michael Moorcock, Mazirian the Magician by Jack Vance. Is that a Dying Earth story? Perhaps. It ends up with Shadows in Zabala by Robert E. Howard, which is not the Conan story I would have chosen, but what the hell? It's probably better than the L. Sprague de Camp stories that are in here. So there you go. The Spell of Seven. I'm going to read that. This one I got fairly recently as a gift, and it has the greatest cover ever. And it's from John Jakes. It's The Planet Wizard. I mean, look at that cover. I mean, just how perfect. So yes, John Jakes of the Kent Family Chronicles and so many other really trashy books. He wrote a lot of trashy books back in the day and a lot of other cool stuff. I like John Jakes a lot. So The Planet Wizard. It's got to be awesome. It's not The Planet Lizard. It's The Planet Wizard. So there you go. There's that. Now here is an anthology. This is a Damon Knight anthology, who I just talked about yesterday. This is one of his Orbit books. This is Orbit 1. This is the first volume launching a new annual series of SF anthologies. Not so new anymore. When was this published? When was Orbit published? Let's see, 1966. So yeah, a Berkeley Medallion book from 1966 with a very awesome 1960s cover. Orbit number 1. I'm going to read that. Hey, look, it's Harry Harrison. Gotta love Harry Harrison. This is War with the Robots. It's War with the Robots. And I want to read this because I haven't read many Harry Harrison short stories, actually. Certainly not enough. And this is a collection of short stories from Harry Harrison. So that's awesome. A pyramid book. War with the Robots. Short stories from Harry Harrison. That's going to be awesome. This next one was a gift from the great David Wiley. This is Block and Bradbury. Stories by Robert Bloch, author of Psycho, and Ray Bradbury, author of The Illustrated Man. So it's a collection of stories from Ray Bradbury and Robert Bloch just put in the same book. Why? Who knows? Let's just put these stories by these 2 different authors in the same book because they are both awesome. And why wouldn't I want to read that? So yeah, I'm not sure what's going on with the cover. That seems like they just couldn't find anything else quick enough, but it is Bloch and Bradbury, and it's going to be awesome, so that's cool. Thanks, David Wiley, for sending me this book. I am going to finally read it once I get to it. Now, this one, I admit, I'm reading merely because I love the cover, and that is This Last Planet. I've mentioned before how I love that robot, and how could you not love that cover? It's awesome. This is Andre Norton, which means it could be very hit and miss. You never know what you're going to get with Andre Norton. It could be a lot of fun. It could be not great. So we'll see. We'll see. I, for the most part, enjoy Norton. So I probably will love this. It just looks like my kind of thing. Another anthology. This is Great Short Novels of Science Fiction, Volume 6. Great Short Novels of Science Fiction, Volume 6. That sun is... I don't usually make videos this late, and that sun is really annoying me. Hold on, Roger. I'm going to do something about that. Let's see if that helps. Where was I? Oh, yes. Science Fiction, the Great Short Novels, Volume 6. This has short novels from Stuart Klote, Robert A. Heinlein, of course, Murray Leinster, the Dean, Now, who is really the dean of science fiction? Is it Robert A. Heinlein or Murray Leinster? Because they have both been described as the dean of science fiction on various old moldy paperbacks. Who is the true dean? I think it's probably Heinlein. But Murray Leinster is in here as well with a short novel, Anthony Boucher, James Blish, and Theodore Sturgeon. So that's awesome. I do not have, I don't think, volumes 1 through 5. I might have them somewhere. But this is volume 6, and it's really cool. Look at that dude with the planet spinning around above his head. That's so cool. So there you go. This next one is an ace double. No truce with Terra. There's no truce with Terra. Things are going all wrong on Terra. Sorry, Terra, no truce for you. This is by Philip E. High, Invasion of the Metal Marauders. So why wouldn't you want to read that? But if you flip it over, it's The Duplicators, another Murray Leinster classic. The Duplicators. Was this the utopian planet? I don't know. We're going to find out when we read it. Now, this next one is fantasy, dark fantasy, probably considering who wrote it. It's by Carl Edward Wagner. You'll see Robert E. Howard's name there and Conan up at the top. This is a pastiche novel about Robert E. Howard's character, Bran MacMorn, written by Carl Edward Wagner, who was a fantastic writer of dark fantasy and horror. And yeah, Carl Edward Wagner is great. And I've never read this. It's a pastiche novel about Bran MacMorn, which makes it kind of unusual. Bran MacMorn, the Pictish king, one of Robert E. Howard's greatest characters, in a novel written by Carl Edward Wagner. How have I not read this yet? I don't know. But there it is, ready to be read. And look, it's another Murray Leinster book. Of course it is. And I got this one just because I love the title. This is Monsters and Such. Monsters and Such. That's what's in this book, Monsters and Such. So there you go. 7 startling stories of the inhuman and non-human by the unrivaled master of the impossible. Well, at least we know Leinster is the unrivaled master of the impossible. There you go. And it's a bunch of monster stories, or stories with monsters in them, apparently. Here's another anthology. This is Man Faces Extraterrestrial Life in Contact. So, look at that big old alien in the rocket ship. I mean, look how awesome this is. We may no longer be alone in the universe. Perhaps we never have been, says the back of the book. Extraordinary stories by Ray Bradbury, Isaac Asimov, Robert Sheckley, Murray Leinster, Frederick Brown, and others, edited by Noel Keyes. So that looks fantastic. Here's a book I should have read by now. It's a book that Steve Donahue bought for me when I was in Boston. It's Fred Saberhagen's Empire of the East. I keep intending to read this. This is actually a trilogy of novels all put into one paperback book. So I'm going to count it as 3 books on the 500 book challenge. Why wouldn't I? An epic fantasy with introductions by Larry Niven and Rogers Lasny. So there you go. And this has the 3 novels. What were they called? The Broken Lands, The Black Mountains, and Ardenna's World. Ardenna's World. So there you go. Empire of the East. Steve says it's good. So there you go. Here's a book I have heard good things about. It's Robert Sheckley, so it's probably great. It is Mind Swap. Mind Swap. Look at that fantastic cover. It's got to be fantastic. It's Mind Swap. I've heard good things about this. I think Book Songs and Other Magic is the channel where I heard about this book. Gareth over there says this book's really good, I think. I think it was him, almost certain. Mind Swap, Robert Sheckley. There you go. Here's a book I've been talking about reading since I started my channel and still have not read it yet. This is Jules Verne's Master of the World, including Rober the Conqueror. There he is. What the hell? Why haven't you read this book yet? He says, looking back at me, the Master of the World. A Jules Verne book I have not read. Actually, there's a lot of those. But yeah, they made a movie off this, obviously, that I have not seen. Is this movie any good? Somebody's probably seen it out there. So yeah, Jules Verne's Master of the World. Another book I've been intending to read for a long time, Shores of Tomorrow by David Mason. I I'm sorry to say that the first time I saw this, I didn't realize that this was a Steranko cover, but that is a cover by Steranko, which might be the most notable thing about this book because I never hear about David Mason, the fellow who wrote this book. Who is David Mason? I looked it up one time, but I think I got another David Mason. So who is this fellow? What's going on with this book? I got this in a big box of science fiction books that I ordered from eBay a few years ago, and I am going to read it. Eventually, it's in this box. Then we've got John W. Campbell Jr. with Who Goes There? We all know this story because it is the story that The Thing is based on, and I have read this story, of course. But this has also, in this book, a bunch of other stories that are shocking, suspenseful science fiction from John W. Campbell. There's also Twilight, Night, Blindness, and The Story of Azer, which is in two parts, Out of Night and Cloak of Azer. So, yeah, Who Goes There? Awesome. This great cover, by the way. There's Campbell there himself. So there's that. Here's another book I've had lying around that I need to read. This is Close to Critical from Hal Clement, by the author of Mission of Gravity, which I know I have somewhere. I've got to read that book, Mission of Gravity. But I did find this one, Close to Critical. Close to Critical, so there we go. This one I just saw a video about from the Great Grammaticus, which is why I dug it out. This is The Dream Master from Roger Zelazny. Grammaticus says it's not Zelazny's best, but it sounded so interesting from the way he described it. And, you know, it is the winner of the Nebula Award, for whatever that's worth. An old ace paperback, The Dream Master. I like Roger Zelazny, so I got to read that. Next, we have the great Henry Kuttner with Mutant. It's Mutant. It's Mutant from Henry Kuttner. So, yeah, I've got to read that. Mutant. I don't know. I don't remember if I read this or not. I might have read this when I was a teenager. I might have, although I don't think it was in that edition. Here's another book from Harry Harrison. This is Captive Universe. It's Captive Universe, a new SF novel by the author of Death World. It's by the author of Death World. It's Captive Universe. Look at that. That looks cool. Here's another ace double. And it's another book by Damon Knight, who I've been talking about the last couple days. This is Masters of Evolution. Masters of Evolution. Look at that. Great cover. I don't know if they are such masters of evolution because look at what's going on this planet. Look at that goofy cat. I don't know if they're such masters, but we'll find out when I read this book. And you flip it over, it's another book. It's Fire in the Heavens, Race Against Doomsday, a book by George O. Smith. No idea what this is about, except it's a spaceship dragging along a bunch of regular ships. So, who knows? We'll find out what's going on when I read the book. Here's a book I've heard about forever, but haven't read yet. I've read other books by A. Merritt, but I haven't yet read The Ship of Ishtar. So, The Ship of Ishtar, I've got a few different copies of this book. I am finally going to read it. It's in my TBR box. I'll get to it eventually. So there it is. It's The Ship of Ishtar. Awesome cover. Awesome cover from this old Avon paperback. So yeah, another book I need to get to. This one I mentioned not too long ago that I want to read it. It's Frank Herbert's Hellstrom's Hive. More insect fun from Frank Herbert. So the time, the 1970s, Police State, USA, the Hellish Hive in Oregon. It's in Oregon. You want a hellish hive, you have to go to Oregon. And we do in this book from Frank Herbert, who is better known from some other book. He wrote some other book. I can't remember what that could have been. And here's an excuse to read some Clark Ashton Smith. I found this lying around. It's Out of Space and Time, Volume 2. Volume 2, look at that. That's awesome. Oh my goodness. That's so great. These old Panther books had some wild covers, and that's one of them. I don't think I have Out of Space and Time, Volume 1. I don't think I do, but I do have Volume 2, so I'll read this one. Why not? It's awesome. It's Clark Ashton Smith, whom I'm always intending to read more of. Here's a collection of short stories from Alfred Bester, who is the great author of The Demolished Man and so many other awesome things. And he wrote short stories, and I don't know that I've ever read any of them, but now I will because they're in this collection, Starburst from Alfred Bester. I must have read a few in various anthologies, but this is a whole collection of stories from Alfred Bester. Alfred Bester, who's looking so cool right there in the corner of the book. Here's another Robert Sheckley book that looks really interesting. This is Immortality Incorporated. This poor guy, he needs some immortality, I think. Just like me, Roger. You gonna help me out? I don't want to have to go to Immortality Incorporated. It probably won't go well, but we'll see when I read this Robert Sheckley book. Look at him. Yeah, that's awesome. Immortality Incorporated. And here's another trilogy of books. I just got this the other day. It's the Swords Trilogy by Michael Moorcock, Chronicles of Corum, which I have read, but it's. I think I read these when I was 12 or 13 or something. It was a long time ago that I read this book. I had this very edition. I must have been, let's see, this is the 9th printing from 1983. I was actually probably around 13 or 14 when I read this, but it's been a long time. Time to read that again as an old man. I showed this the other day. Yes, I'm going to be reading Crashing Suns by Edmund Hamilton, which some people say, or at least one commenter said, it has one good story and some other stories that aren't so good. How can they not all be good? Look at that guy. It's got to be fantastic. And Donovan's Brain. Yes, I am going to get to Donovan's Brain, which is kind of a horror thing. And it's by Kurt Soidmak, who I believe, didn't Soidmak write the screenplay for The Wolfman? Here, I'll tell you. I have it right here. It's the original shooting script. Did Soidmak write this? Yeah, Kurt Soidmak. There you go. Wolfman. He wrote that. But he also wrote Donovan's Brain. So there you go. Wolfman is one of my favorite films of all time. So that's awesome. And here's a book I've heard a lot of good things about. Rogue Moon from Aldous Budrys, who I saw a review of this from the Outlaw Bookseller, which means it's probably great because he said good things about it and he knows all about that sort of thing. Yes, The Shores of Space by Richard Matheson. Science fiction stories from one of my favorite writers of all time. I am going to read that. I showed that recently. And more John Jake's goodness. It's time to get to more Brack. Brack. This is Brack the Barbarian versus the Sorceress. He's going up against the Sorceress. Yes, he is. Don't mess with Brack, Sorceress. Then, of course, Pebble in the Sky by Isaac Asimov. I mentioned recently I want to read this book sometime soon, so there's that. Here's another book I mentioned fairly recently, The Stainless Steel Rat, Adventures of the Stainless Steel Rat. More from Harry Harrison. These are the books that he is best known for, I think. I think it's the Stainless Steel Rat. He's probably better known for these than Death World, right? Who knows? He also wrote those Eden books, which I've also heard good things about. Okay, here's some more stuff. This is Brian Aldiss, Star Swarm. It's Star Swarm from Brian Aldiss. I know nothing about this book except it's called Starstorm, and Brian Aldiss wrote it. And it's another exciting chronicle novel of the far distant future when the descendants of man have swept across 10,000 worlds. 10,000. This is another book I picked up merely because I want to read it because I like the cover. And why wouldn't you? Look at these guys. It's the Solarians from Norman Spinrad. Could Palmer trust the Solarians' plan of surrendering Earth to its enemy? No. I can tell you right now, no, you can't trust that plan. I mean, look at these dudes. They're the Solarians. Why wouldn't I want to read that? Here's another Edmund Hamilton book. It's Edmund Hamilton. It's The Valley of Creation. Valley of Creation. Beasts, men, or aliens? Alien forces struggle to rule a strange, forgotten world, great fantasy adventure in the tradition of Edgar Rice Burroughs. Sold! I'm sold. Look at that. Of course, another cat. Here is another ace double. These are both from Robert Silverberg. This is The Seed of Earth. The Seed of Earth? It's The Seed of Earth. Going to be flying off in that big phallic symbol there. If your number is up, you go to the stars. Sorry, buddy. No choice. The next is The Next Stop, the Stars. Exciting stories of wonder in new worlds. So I guess this is actually a book of short stories on this side. Yes, Slaves of the Giant Stars, Blaze of Glory, Hopper. So yeah, short stories from Robert Silverberg. Look at that big clunky robot like they had back in the olden days. And one more book. Now I have promised a certain someone who's been telling me to read this that I would read it. And I will, even though it's 600 pages long. And it's not really all that vintage, but it is Werner Vinge's A Fire Upon the Deep. I've been told I need to read this because it's the greatest. When are you going to read this book, you idiot? Read A Fire Upon the Deep. You need to read it, read it, read it, read it. I will read it as ordered. I will read this book. It is in my TBR box. I will read it, even though it's long, which I wanted to avoid because of the 500 book challenge. But, you know, I hear good things. I hear good things, Roger. Okay, I'll shut up. It's time to put up this video. I will catch you next time.